I'm here with another incredible entrepreneur, someone who is just killing it in the real estate space, really all over. And I'm here with really, probably one of the best people, one of the top coaches as far as mindset is concerned. I mean, he's an entrepreneur. He's touched every industry, is what it seems like, but just an incredible human being. I've known him for a few weeks at this point, and he's changed my life in so many ways. So I'm just hoping that he can change your guys' life. So everyone, welcome Mr. Mindset Marlon. How you doing?
Yo, Bryce, I appreciate that, man. Dude, thank you for the kind words. I'm excited to be here. You've been absolutely one of those people that, like, since I've met from day one, the energy has been good. We got to have you over at the house for a game night, which was an epic time. Seeing you at the meetups here local in town, I'm excited for today, man.
Just diving right in. Why is mindset so important? Like, what? Well, let me backtrack. What is mindset, and why is it so important?
Okay, that's a big question. So, I'm gonna answer that. I'm gonna take a few ways with that. So, first off, what is mindset? Mindset, it can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. So when I talk about mindset, I'm going to share with everyone the definition I like to use about mindset. And I want to even like give people an image. I wish I could like draw right now. Like I do a whole presentation where I actually like draw like an image of the mind, something I learned from Bob Proctor. But let's answer the question this way. Mindset for people that are trying to understand is the part of a person that ultimately controls their identity, and it controls their self image and their results that they produce. The reason we focus on mindset so much is because until that changes and it gets into alignment with the goals that we want to have, that we want to accomplish, the results that we desire in our life, until our mindset is in alignment with those sort of results and that image, we're going to be fighting an uphill battle on a rainy day trying to push a boulder. Like it's not impossible, but it becomes extremely, extremely, extremely difficult. So when I talk to people about shifting their mindset, I'll typically say something like, you have to change your paradigm. And sometimes people have heard that word paradigm and they don't quite understand what it means. Paradigm is that internal self image. In fact, I want people to think about their paradigm as being like a thermostat, right? If the thermostat in your home is set to 70 degrees Celsius or 70 degrees Fahrenheit, we don't want to set it at 70 degrees Celsius, we'll die. 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and I walk into your house in the middle of the winter and I pop open the windows and the cold air begins to come into the room and it cools the room down to about 50 degrees. What will happen is the thermostat will pick up the change in temperature, the deviation, and it will kick the heater on and heat will begin coming through the vents and it will begin to warm the room back up to 70 until it stabilizes and then it'll shut off again, right? Vice versa. If it's a hot summer day, the windows are open, hot air comes in, you're in Arizona, and your room starts heating up to 90 degrees. Again, the thermostat would register the change and it would begin to kick on the AC. AC comes through the vents, cools the room down, and brings us right back at 70. So the 70 degrees in this case of an individual, that's their paradigm. Their mind is set. They're a 70 degreer, right? And let's say they're trying to achieve $100,000 a year, $200,000, $1 million a year. That's the equivalent of them trying to set the temperature to 90 degrees. Well, what's the problem? They start bringing in this outside air to warm the room up, but the thermostat, their 70-degree thermostat, keeps kicking on and cooling the room back down. So in people's lives, when the thermostat kicks on, they see and feel that as self sabotage, bad luck. Things just never go my way. No one's answering. No one wants to help me. Like all this stuff because they are out of alignment. There's a misalignment, right? It's not that your thermostat is broken, it's just set to the wrong temperature. Your goals are up here, your thermostat's down here. Your job is to, in fact, change the setting on your thermostat so that now it's in alignment. Now, when you're in alignment, the work you do will be producing the result you want. But down here, the work you do only produces results at this level. So we've got to raise the level, and that's the mindset. And if that isn't addressed Unfortunately, a person could be given all the tactics. They can be given all the resources. I can give them all the videos. Here's the course. Here's the book. Here's the phone call. Here's the list. Here's the dialer. Here's everything you need. But if internally they still see themselves as a 70 degreer and I'm trying to give them 90-degree lifestyle, 90-degree tactics, 90-degree resources, they will not be able to produce the results. And even if they, for a short time, do produce the results, if they do not change, they will find that they quickly pull themselves back down.
Wow, that is so good. So many nuggets in just short amount of time. You're such a good communicator, and I just love getting around you because you paint such a beautiful picture. And so, So how do you change the thermostat? Because that's good. I mean, that's the question everyone wants to know after you said that. It's like, okay, well, I want these 90-degree results. So what can people do to change that thermostat?
Great, great question. So the thermostat can be changed a multitude of ways. And I would say the easiest, I'm sure like everyone is similar to me, right? Like you want not even necessarily the easiest, but you want the fastest way, right? We as humans, we tend to be impatient. And like my job is to see like, oh my gosh, that's a decade-long process. How do I condense it and get it done in days? If I can do that, I'm a happy human. So in order to change the thermostat, to change your paradigm and have what we essentially consider a paradigm shift, some people have heard of that. There's a few things that can cause it. The fastest thing that causes a paradigm shift is an extremely emotionalized experience. What do I mean by that? Let's just think, for example, and I'm going to go negative for a second just to paint the picture. Somebody is driving down the road and they're on a motorcycle and they have a terrible accident, and the accident leaves them banged up in the hospital for 6 months, and immediately they get rid of the identity of I'm a motorcycle rider and never gets on a motorcycle again, never has the temptation to ride a motorcycle again, and motorcycles are gone from their life. Why? Because you would say that person had a traumatic experience, right? We label it traumatic, but when I look at it, I'm not going to give it the label traumatic. I'm going to say that person had a highly emotionalized experience. There was a lot of emotion in the being flung off the motorcycle, being slung down the road. So that experience carried so much emotional energy. It caused a shift in that person that became what we consider to be permanent. Nothing is ever actually permanent, but we use the term permanency in the sense of a person's lifetime. So, in that person's short lifetime of 100 years, they never again went back and did the motorcycle riding. Or very much like when you were a kid, you had an open mind about everything. You touched the hot stove, paradigm shift occurred. No one ever had to tell you not to touch the hot stove again, right? Like you've mentally shifted and you avoided hot stoves. So now when we're talking about shifting that paradigm for the better, for bringing into our lives more money, better relationships, new opportunities, things of that nature. How do I want to shift it? I want to create highly emotionalized experiences in the positive aspect of what I want. This is why you'll see we do things like we'll go to mastermind events where there are these big, almost like rock star concerts for entrepreneurs, right? Like very highly emotionalized learning experience. So when I'm in that room, the things that I learn, they stick faster than they do when I'm just reading the book by myself, right? So I figure out a way to, or when I'm making the calls and I'm building my business and I find that, hey, this phone call is the phone call that I'm nervous about. I'm terrified to make this phone call. Awesome. People avoid that phone call. I'm like, make that phone call because all of that emotional experience with making that phone call will help what you gather in that phone call to stick. But that's one way. Second way of shifting the paradigm is going to be very intentional study. So, actually, when we sit down and we learn about the paradigm and we start to study personal development, we start to study our mindset, we start to study our behavior and our habits, doing so intentionally, observing yourself and studying with the intention on, I want to learn more about me so I can adjust me, I can create me on purpose. And I say intentional study because Bryce, sometimes people sit down and they will study, they'll pick up a book on personal development, but they're just going through the motion and they're not actually asking themselves, why are they reading this book? See, I learned this from Jim Quick. I met him 2 years back in Vegas. and he mentioned this. He said, whenever he studies, he does he asks himself three questions. First question is, how am I going to use what it is I'm about to learn? So I'm asking, how am I going to use this when I pick up a book or as I listen to a podcast, as people listen to this episode? I'm going to tell them right now so they can use it for the next 30 minutes. How am I going to use what I'm learning? Why must I use what I am learning? And when and where will I use what I'm learning? And so this allows information that comes in to be purposefully applied. So when I'm taking in information, I'm aware that I'm taking it in for the sake of building this new paradigm, building this new character. So as I got into real estate, I was aware that when I was learning the information, why was I learning that information? What was I doing with it? I was taking it all in for the sake of changing my identity. Before real estate, I was a parkour athlete. I was a professional parkour pro. And I needed to shift my knowledge base, shift my language, shift my identity, shift my understanding, shift my perspective and viewpoints of the world. And all of that helped to change the paradigm. So that's number two, it's intentional study. The third way of shifting the paradigm is my favorite way, and it's a cheat code. I honestly think this is life's greatest cheat code. Dude, straight up, like, it's proximity. I call it the campfire effect, and I learned this from Cody Barton. He Let me tell you a quick story. Cody Barton, some of the people, if anyone's local here to Arizona, or if anyone's in the real estate industry, they know that name. He's partners with Pace Morby. They run a large real estate operation now. They own multiple businesses together. And Cody just turned 30, but has already been a millionaire since he was, I think he earned his first million at like 21 or something like that. And Cody, when he was a young man, he understood that he wanted to go and become wealthy. And he started searching for many things and he landed on MLM, multi-level marketing. Some people know that and they hate it. Some people are like, oh my gosh, one of those. Because what's the truth? 90% of people that do that, probably 95% of the people that do it, never make a dime. So Cody goes out to his first MLM event where they're pitching him and he sees it, he sees the opportunity, and afterwards he stands up, walks to the front of the room, and talks to the two guys who had just put on the presentation. And he says, listen, guys, I'm in, right? Like, I want to be successful. I want to make money. I see your cars outside. I see the way you're dressed. I see the way you're talking. What do I need to do to be successful? They take Cody, they put their arm over his shoulder and turn him around. And they say, look at this crowd, look at this room of people. A majority of these people are going to fail. Now Cody's like, whoa, like you telling me you're scamming these people? He said, no, whoa, we're not scamming anybody. I'm just telling you the cold hard truth is that tonight, what just happened in here was tonight, these people came in and they heard the message and they saw the opportunity and they stood around this fire and they got warmed by its flames. And what they're doing right now is they're taking a bit of this fire home with them. They're lighting their own torch and they're taking this fire and they're going to run out of those doors into the cold, dark, windy, rainy world and they're going to run out there with their torch thinking they got it and they're going to start their own they're going to try and start their own bonfire, but the problem is they're not going to find a home for their fire fast enough, and the world and the winds and the rains are going to beat that flame down until it gets smaller, 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 till eventually it's just a little ember, and then that ember goes out. And then when you talk to that person and say, hey, what about multi-level marketing, they're going to say, man, it doesn't work. Man, that whole thing's a scam. Says the way that you become successful in this business, you got to keep coming back to the fire. You keep returning back to this fire. You keep getting inspired. You keep getting motivated. You keep gaining knowledge. You stick close to the fire, and the fire will continue to warm you and grow you. So Cody listened to them. And guess what? Every week he was coming back to those same meetings, doing the personal development, just returning over and over and over. Cody was one of the few people I know that's ever made money off of multi-level marketing, made his first six figures while he was still 18. I made multiple six figures. And so, Bryce, when we think about this, right, because this is the power of proximity, what's interesting is if you think about a fire, the fire is what the fire is. But the ability for the fire to warm you if you're standing next to it versus if you're standing 100 feet away from it changes drastically. Right? There's a proximal, a physical proximity that turns on its effect on you. So when we're talking about shifting the paradigm, let's bring it full circle. When I'm talking about shifting my paradigm, and maybe I want to become a seven-figure earner, but I'm spending more time, I'm in physical proximity with W-2 earners who are making 40 to $60,000 a year. I'm getting the heat from that fire, and the seven-figure fire is way over there. I've got to start moving myself into closer physical proximity. Now, if I can't change my physical proximity as of yet, at the bare minimum, I need to do what the listeners are doing right now and start plugging myself in through my mental. I need to get mental proximity. I need to drown out all the other noise. I need to be listening to guys like Bryce. I need to be listening to the people that you bring on as guests on the show and start to let that affect my mind and start to shift the way I view the world. Because if a person wants to become a seven-figure earner, they need to be a seven-figure earner first and then go out and do the work. So that physical proximity is the biggest cheat code. In fact, that's the reason I moved. I relocated from New York to Arizona, not because there wasn't money in New York. There's a lot of money in New York, but I had access to the people here in Arizona. In New York, I didn't have access to those circles, right? I could only observe from the outside. I was never able to be in the room. So I went to a place where I could get in the room. So get in the room, whether you need to pay to be in the room, whether you need to work to be in the room, whether you need to sneak in through the back door, do whatever it takes to get in the room. And then when you get in the room, your job is to be quiet, listen, and be observant, right? Observe, how can I add value? Don't ask people how you can add value, or you can if they're open to telling you, but observe and look for opportunities based on authentic observation to add value. And then when you see a place to add value, don't even ask for permission. Just begin adding the value. Just give it.
Like what you're saying from just adding value when you're in the room, like listening. There's also a level of intentionality when you're in proximity, not just with the learning or anything like that, but when you are around the people, you have to be intentional as well. Because at least I've found some of the people that I know, like they're like, yeah, I want to be successful, I want to do this, and they go through the motion reading the books, and you can tell, because you can tell people that are like intentional and they want to grow, and so they're doing that, and they're like, hey, like come to this event, like you want to grow, this is perfect for you. And it's the same thing, they're just there to be there, but they're not intentionally investing in themselves, intentionally like introducing themselves or listening or finding those ways to add value.
It's true. And the reason being is when a person starts to shift their paradigm, Bryce, see what we when we talk about it like this, it seems so simple. Right? Oh yeah, just get in the room, read the books, like and you'll be fine. The truth, however, of what it feels like, what it will emotionally feel like, is inside of that person's world. Let's say that they've been person A for the last 18 years. And now they recognize that person A, the results of person A sucks. Right? Person A has crappy friends, a crappy job, lives in a crappy house in a crappy neighborhood. I don't want person A's life anymore. I want person B's life. Cool. Fair. Now, when I start making the shift to become person B is starting off as like an infant. Person A is already like 18 years old. Person B is starting off as an infant. But because I'm intentionally growing person B, I can kind of like pump growth into person B a lot faster with the emotion, with the intentional study, and with the proximity. So person B can grow in a matter of weeks and months and a year versus the slow growth of person A, right? Because I'm being very intentional about growing person B. And so it gets to the point where person B starts to catch up with the size of person A. And see, up to this point, person A didn't really care because person B is not a threat, right? Yeah, it's whatever. Like my nothing feels unusual. But it's not until person B really starts to get a little bit of life to him, right? You're starting to dedicate waking up a little bit earlier. You're dedicating 30 minutes of reading per day. You're dedicating going into new rooms, right? You're doing all these things. And now person B is the same size. Interesting. What starts to happen is there's a bit of a disagreement. There's like a dis-ease, right? Like there's it's no longer ease, it's dis-ease internally. So my internal world is literally starting to shake as these two people who are not in harmony with one another are clashing. So now internally, it feels like something's wrong. What does that mean? What does it feel like something wrong? It feels I'm getting stressed out. I'm a little anxious. I feel a little bit overwhelmed, right? All of these feelings are coming up, and people take these feelings and signs as a indicator to turn back. Whoa, let me back off. Something's not working right now. Whoa, let me back off. I'm feeling too much pressure, right? That's what it feels like. It feels like pressure. There's internal pressure and they choose to back off. I'm telling you right now, when you feel that pressure, it is a healthy sign that you are moving into a new territory. You're breaking through what we refer to as the terror barrier. You're breaking past a terror barrier. And so you have to continue to feed into person B so that person B can become larger and he or she will begin to restabilize the land and you will be at a new baseline. And what feels amazing after you make it through that terror barrier will eventually, and we all know this from personal life experience, give it some time, it will start to feel like a new normal and the growth cycle will begin again. But that is always the same process of growth. And sometimes what happens is people have disconnected from the growth process because it's been such a long time since they did something new, right? They were growing up as kids, they kind of went through the process. So they either forgot the sort of process they went through as children when they learned things for the first time. And it's been so long since they've created paradigm shifts for themselves, that they created new skills, that they created new pieces of their identity, that they are disconnected to the process. So as adults, when they go and do that process again, it feels like, whoa, this can't be right. And they keep backing off. And here's the interesting part, Bryce. When they do that, it looks like this. Like it's they start going forward, hit that barrier, they go back. Then they go forward again, hit that barrier, go back. Go forward, hit that barrier, go back. As far as their brain is concerned, if you ask them, they'll tell you, "Yeah, I've been working on this forever. I've been working on this for like a year or 2 years." Well, yeah, but you keep turning back at the critical point. So you're doing a lot of motion, but you're not going anywhere. You're literally running back and forth in place. And that's why it's so frustrating. You have to keep going through because both are going to be uncomfortable. This will be uncomfortable and this will be uncomfortable. The only difference is this puts you in a new location.
Right. Man, that's so good. And I want to just kind of expand on that a little bit. So, for the people that have kind of got used to their comfort zone and created that comfort zone, and now they don't know how to kind of break through that. Because I mean, I've been around personal development for, I mean, 10 years now. So, I'm like constantly trying to grow and just always improve. And one of my mentors told me one time, like, yeah, when you feel butterflies, that means go. Like, you have to do it when you get the butterflies. And so that's like something I try to live by is if I'm out doing whatever, like even my first networking event, just in regards to real estate, where I tell you like the butterflies that I had, like for no reason really, because like I've been to networking events, but it's like, oh, this is a new industry, like a new person is coming out, like you said, like person B. But I'm like, that just means I'm in the right place and I have to do it. But for those people that like they haven't uh, built that muscle or their muscle is so weak, like how do you develop, whether it's discipline or intentionality, like how do you cultivate that so that you can start to move to a place of growth?
Great question. So the way we cultivate that is, and great point, right? Like I love the fact that you have registered that signal of ooh, butterflies in the stomach. That doesn't mean stop, that means go. You change what your response is because humans, we have as individuals, we have the ability to respond, right? Like that's our responsibility, right? Responsibility, ability to respond. It's in the word. So it's our responsibility to choose our response. So overcoming that, or essentially what I like to call it is like the habit of courage, right? Like that's what it is. It's creating the habit of being courageous. Because if we think about what is courage, courage isn't the absence of being afraid. Courage is being afraid and moving forward anyway. And so when we want to build up to it, it's baby steps. And this is where I sometimes get upset with I watch people sometimes give each other advice and it's sometimes taken out of context. And I want people to get the full picture. For example, people will listen to Grant Cardone. I love Grant Cardone, by the way. Like after I read his book, I started off hating him, read his book. I was like, oh, this guy actually he makes sense to me. I like him now. And he's got the 10x rule, right? Which is whatever your goal is, 10x that sucker, right? You want to make $1 million, your goal needs to be make $10 million. You want to make 10 calls today, it should be make 100 calls today, right? 10x everything. And so, with that being the case, yes, 10x your life, 10x your goals, but then be okay breaking down the milestones into smaller chunks and be okay starting small. Because if anyone understands compound interest, you understand that the main factor to compound interest is time. It's time that you leave the investment in. It's time that you take the action over and over and over again without ever breaking the consistency to it. And so over time, the growth, the results, the curve becomes exponential. And for anyone that's listening to the audio and not seeing the video, like I'm literally like kind of making almost like a Nike check mark swoosh with my finger so that you can understand what exponential growth looks like. Where in the beginning, it's slow and low at the bottom, and it seems like for years and years, nothing's really happening. But then it starts to tick up and it starts to shoot up like a rocket ship going into outer space. And for people that are saying, like, okay, what does that translate to from a standpoint of being courageous? Very simple. It might be like how Bryce, you went to your first meetup and inside there saying, you know what, I need the goal of being able to network. I need to network better and build out my community and be able to talk to anybody anywhere. Cool. That might start with you going to your very first meetup and introducing yourself to just one person that night. That's it. Just introducing yourself to just one person, walking up to one person you don't know and saying, hi, my name is Marlon. Hi, my name is Bryce. It's nice to meet you. Is this your first time coming out to the meetup? Right. And that like literally rewarding yourself because here's another thing. When we talk about shifting the paradigm and we talk about changing our identity, it's important that we also identify what are the actions of the new identity of that new person. Sometimes when we're looking at becoming the new person, we only ever identify the end results. I want to be a successful investor. That means the end result is I see that as being a person who has 500 units under management, right? I own 500 units. Great. What if I only considered myself an entrepreneur and an investor after I got to 500? The challenge with that is I'm going to live the next 5, 10 years feeling like an absolute failure because I'm not at 500 yet. Instead, however, what if, imagine that I instead identify, well, what are the sort of activities and characteristics of the individual who owns the 500? And how would that 500 person who owns the 500 be acting if he were in my time today with the resources I had, the experiences I had, and he had to relive today? And I can recognize those activities and I can then begin to reward myself for taking those actions today. And I can begin to associate the behavior today, the identity today with the future reality of tomorrow. And that's how we start to get into alignment. That's how we start to act a little bit more courageous because now I'm literally borrowing courage. I'm borrowing energy from my future self.
Man, that's so good. And I love what you said about breaking the goals down to like smaller pieces. Like, because really, I mean, the age old saying, every journey of 1,000 steps starts with the single step, right? And you got to have that first step. And I think it's very easy especially in today's social media world where you see the results of everybody else, and you don't see the work that they put in. So it's very easy to say, oh, I want to 10x this, and then think that you're going to get from point A to point 100 in one step. But no, you got to take every single step on your way to that journey.
And Bryce, is it cool if I share something about that?
Yeah, 100%.
You said the social media day and age. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I love social media, and yet I view it as a double-edged sword that can chop my arm off if I wield it incorrectly. And so, what do I mean by that? Bryce, I'm someone that, by other people's standards, they would call me successful, right? And by other people's standards, I'm not successful yet. And by my own standard, I'm extremely successful because I'm every day moving forward towards my dream and desire. And with that being the case, I have found myself in certain days and certain moments opening up my social media, opening up Instagram, and seeing friends of mine who are doing different businesses than me, who are doing well in business. I found myself on their page feeling jealousy. And I'm like, whoa, why am I feeling jealous of this person? That's odd. Because I know when I sit down by myself, when I'm alone at the end of the night and I'm reflecting, I have no desire to do their business. There's no interest in it. I don't want to do what they're doing. But yet, in the middle of the day, when I'm on Instagram and I'm looking at their page, for some reason, I find all the doubt and the criticism and the comparison begins to turn on. And I start feeling like I'm not doing enough and I'm not moving fast enough. And I should have already been there and I should have already been that. And I'm like, whoa, why is this happening? Because I logically know better, but emotionally I'm still human. So I still, as a human, I can fall into those same traps that anybody else can. And why? Because I am now observing. I'm looking into their world where in the past I would have never been able to look into another person's world in the middle of a Tuesday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon unless I was physically with them. We have to realize this is not normal. So, something that I do that helps me stay extremely productive, helps me ride my lane, and helps me grow at a way faster pace because you can get a lot done, right? People overestimate what they could do in a month, underestimate what they could do in a year, right? People overestimate what they could do in a year and underestimate what they could do in a decade. What helps is during the work hours, like right now, my phone is in airplane mode. If y'all can see that, there's like a little airplane up there. My phone, and you saw it, like I didn't change anything just now. My phone, it stays in airplane mode when I'm working. I have a timer sitting here on the side of my desk, and when I'm working, I'm focused on just what I am working on, oblivious to what's happening in the rest of the world, oblivious to what's happening in your life at this moment, what's happening in the lives of my friends and my mentors and everyone else. I'm just only focused on the work and the task in front of me. And so when people are wanting to grow, when they're wanting to shift their paradigms, I want them to take their focus. In the beginning, you're going to be rewarded. Check this out. You get rewarded in the early stages of your entrepreneurial journey for picking your head up and looking around. That's how you found this world, right? You found this podcast by looking around on YouTube or Spotify or wherever. You found about real estate and entrepreneurship and drop shipping and all these other things by looking around. And that you were rewarded for because now you got to enter a new world. And then there's the moment where you commit to stepping into that new world where now that same behavior that rewarded you is now punishing you. Because now that you've entered into this world, the more you look around, we refer to that as shiny object syndrome, AKA the inability to stay focused. And so inside this world now, the one who gets rewarded once you step into the kingdom is the person that can put the blinders on, quiet their world, and focus on their lane, focus on their skill, and just ride their lane. And if more entrepreneurs can learn that a little bit faster, because listen, we're human, we all gotta touch the flame, right? But you don't need to get second degree burns from touching the flame. So go ahead and let yourself get a little bit of shiny object in the beginning so you can understand exactly how destructive and wasteful of a time it is. And now understand that once you get in, there's a period of time, there's a season, right? Seasons aren't here to last forever. It doesn't stay winter forever. But there is a season where you must put your blinders on, put your head down, chop wood, and carry water. and you do not focus on anything else except for the chopping of wood and carrying of water. And when you're in the next season of your life, you can begin to pick your head up and start to ask questions again of like, what can I do better? What can I do differently? What can I do new? What other opportunities are out there? But if you're always just looking for the next new opportunity, you never get the opportunity now and today to develop yourself, to develop your skills, to develop your knowledge, to help grow that new paradigm into something amazing and into someone amazing.
Right, man, that's so good. I said it earlier, but you're an amazing communicator. Like you paint such an incredible picture. Like I know the listeners are going to get so much out of it, and I mean, I get so much out of it. Anytime I can get around you, like I appreciate that. And I could literally talk to you for hours because I just love hearing you talk. But I want to kind of shift focus because I mean, I got a million follow-up questions just from that alone. But you mentioned that you moved from New York to Phoenix to get around, get in proximity. So that's one thing. And then also, I know you recently interviewed someone very successful, and I know you've done a lot of interviews with very successful people. But can you talk about one, maybe your change, why you moved? I mean, I know to get into proximity, but like a little more of a deep dive of why you moved to Arizona, as well as like what interviewing these people that are far more like further ahead of it than you, how that has raised your mindset or changed your mindset.
100%. So I'm going to start with the second question first, because the second question, as far as like how I interviewed people and like what it's taught me, came about even the interviewing, right? Like my podcast originally started off back when I was a parkour athlete. I was interviewing my favorite pro parkour athletes. And it started purely from I used to coach kids in parkour, and I was finding that a lot of them had a lot of misconception in their mind about like what we as pro athletes were doing and how we were approaching things. And we weren't just sending it recklessly. If anyone knows about the sport parkour, this is, think about like gymnastics but outdoor on cement. So it has the potential to be dangerous. If you mess up, you're not falling on a soft mat or a spring floor. And kids were telling me that, man, like Marlon, like they're mentioning, Dom, he goes out, he just keeps going bigger and bigger and bigger every day. And I'm like, what do you mean he goes bigger and bigger every day? Like, yeah, like they pull out their phone, they show me his Instagram, and you see one clip, like he's front flipping off a roof, and the next clip, he's front flipping off of this. And like the acts just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And they're thinking in their mind, every morning Dom wakes up and finds the next big thing to jump off of. And I'm like, you kids have no realization that he's done a lot of this stuff, has recorded it, and is releasing it over time. That what you're seeing on social media isn't necessarily reality yet, right? Like it's not the same. Your brain is telling you what the reality is. It's filling in the blanks, and it's making it impossible for you to keep up with the blanks that you're filling in. This is what a lot of people do in business, right? They see, you know, Grant Cardone, they see a 5 second snippet of his life, and they assume they know what the rest of it looks like. And so the podcast got started for that. But then when I started to change my desires to learn about business, and I wanted to start getting into these rooms, and I wanted to still be around like the pros, right? But I didn't have the skill set yet. My good buddy of mine, Alan Avgi, shout out to Alan. He was one of the first people I interviewed on my podcast. He is about 29 years old. Actually, he might have just turned 30. He owns over $100 million in real estate, built it from the ground up. Um, Family came here from Israel, and just absolutely, rags to riches kind of story. Just worked his freaking guts out, still continues to work his guts out. And he sat down with me and he said, Marlon, I want to tell you something. One, I love you as a friend. The reason I made time for you today, though, was because you approached me with value, whether you realized it or not. You asked me to come on your podcast. And by asking me to come on the podcast, you've given me access to a new audience. And you've also let me talk about the things I'm passionate about. And you've just allowed me to dig deep. And he said, if you want to get into rooms with bigger players, because that's what you're going to ultimately want to do if you want to change your life, you got to get into bigger rooms. He said, present these people with the opportunity to come on your platform, to come on your podcast. And that will give them the permission to talk about themselves where they're not bragging, right? Because you're asking them to share. And naturally, as humans, we're all the same. We all want to talk about the things going on in our lives, right? But when a successful person starts talking about what's going on in their life, other people might see it as bragging. Ah, he's just talking about another deal he did. He's just talking about how much money he made. He's just talking about the cool trip he went on, right? But when someone is asking you about it, it gives you permission to share. And he planted that seed with me that my podcast would be, because all the parkour pros, they were already my friends. So I didn't look at it as this was the reason I was getting access to them. I just looked at it as I was hitting up the homies to see who wants to come and talk next. And then when it came to this, I was like, ooh, I do want to meet the Cody Bartons of the world. And I do want to meet the Glenn Sanfords of the world. And I do want to meet the Sharif Medawars and the Steve Trains and all these people. And I got access to them because of my podcast. So I always like, I love what you're doing, Bryce. Like, I love how you're using the podcast to share knowledge, to share experience, and for you to go out and grow your own network. It's absolutely genius. And I think everyone listening should go and start a podcast. And keep this in mind. I started my podcast before I ever did a single deal, before I ever made money in real estate, before I ever made, or I made a little bit of money in entrepreneurship, but before I made serious money in entrepreneurship, I started my podcast. So you don't need experience to start this, to be able to go out and talk to these higher level people. So the podcast helped open doors. And as far as the move to Arizona, why Arizona? It was quite simple. During 2019, I got into real estate entrepreneurship. And if you know what happened after 2019, COVID came and shut the world down. New York was one of those places that got shut down major. And during that time of being home on the computer, on the phone, searching for things, I came across Pace Morby and ended up joining his mentorship program. It's the Sub 2 mentorship program. If anyone's ever interested in joining Sub 2, reach out to me. I got a affiliate code for y'all because it is straight up the best community in the freaking world to learn about creative financing and real estate. Um, but I started talking to Pace and I DM'd him on Instagram. And I was just like, yo, dude, like, I'm very much like a monkey see, monkey do, hands on kind of person. And I'm struggling out here in New York. New York is shut down. Like I can't go to an office. I can't knock on doors. I can't go to RIAs. Can I come out to Arizona to basically shadow your team? I'm not asking for a job. You don't need to put me up anywhere. I just literally want to come, open up my laptop, and work in your office for a day. Absolutely, dude. He let me come down. And when I came down here, to make a long story short, I learned a lot, met a lot of amazing people, got the energy, my literally that new paradigm I was trying to grow, got like, if anyone's ever played Pokemon, it's kind of like when you give your Pokemon like that EXP share and you let like your good Pokemon battle, but the other Pokemon is getting points and they level up faster, even though they're just chilling on the sideline. That's basically what happened to me. Like I just shot up in experience points, came home, locked up like my first deal after 8 months of trying, locked up my first deal within like 2 weeks of being home from that trip, and was like, okay, there is energy out here that I can tap into that works with me, that resonates with me. And I've grown up in New York. I've always wanted to leave. I was living at home with my mom and my sister. I needed change. I needed to grow as a human. And Arizona was on the radar. Quite frankly, Bryce, it was between Arizona and Colorado. And Colorado almost won because I did it as a road trip where I drove cross country. And stopped in Colorado. I was actually there for about 10 days getting settled in and was like, I'm liking this. And then one day I stepped outside and I got hit with that cold breeze. And I was like, you know what? I've done 20 plus years of winter in New York. I'm good. I'm looking to be somewhere with winter again. Yeah, so that's how I ended up in Arizona. And, since being here, the connections I've made, every deal I've done has come as a form of a connection. I've done no, I am not, some people say they're self-made. I am not self-made. A lot of people put their hands in the pot to make me. A lot of people. And I'm grateful for every last one of them. Pip Stellick, Pace Morby, Don Rich, Keston Glasgow. Like, just the list goes on of the people who have helped to create me and make me and mold me. And I'm still being made to this day. And now I just get the privilege of being able to pay it forward to some other individuals.
Man, I love that. That is amazing. Incredible story. I know we got to wrap, so I won't take much more of your time. But my last question, in the spirit of the Labelist podcast, we all get labels put on us. whether from yourself, preconceived ideas you get, or even from other people, even if well-meaning people, family, friends, stuff like that. So what would you say is a way that people can remove labels from their life in quick 3 action steps? I mean, that's a whole nother podcast, like by itself, just removing those labels. But what would you say that the people could do coming out of this?
3 action steps. If I had to boil it down to 3 action steps to change the label, here's what I would say. I would first ask myself, what is the first thing I'll do is I would ask myself this question and really sit and reflect with it. What is the story that I've been telling about me? Like when I'm sitting by myself, what is the story that I tell myself about who I am? Because straight up, like, forget what anyone else thinks about me. Really, like, other people's opinions don't matter. They don't. They really don't. As when we're younger, you put way more emphasis on what people think about you compared to when you're older. The older you get, the less you care. This is why you see, 70-year-olds just at the dinner table dropping the F bomb. They don't give a crap, right? But a 14-year-old kid cares about everything you say about them. So I'd ask that person to sit and think, what is the story I tell me about me? Then I would ask myself from that standpoint, once I acknowledge it, I would then ask myself, what is the story I want to have written about me? Like, who is it that I want to be? All right. So I would ask myself, what's the story? Then what's the story that I would prefer? Since I get to be the author, I get to be the director of the movie. How would I like this movie to actually go? And from there, what I would do to change it is then I would to change it, I would actually here's what I would really do. I would sit down and I would write out in perfect detail on paper. I would physically get a paper. I'd write out the description of that version of me, like that character, right? Just like I'm an actor, I'd write out the actor. And every day I would read that paper in the present tense with the words I am, right? I am courageous. I am intelligent. I am handsome. I am a go-giver. I would read it every single day over and over and over. And while I read that each day, like when I finish reading it in the morning, I would ask myself, how am I going to act out this character today? And just like if I was a kid in acting school, I would act into that role. See, I know people say fake it till you make it, and I'm not a fan of that saying personally. However, Tom Bailey, billionaire, the owner of Quest, he is the podcast host of Impact Theory. Great guy. If people haven't ever heard of him, I heard him say this saying about 2 or 3 years ago. He said, "Don't fake it till you make it. Live it until you learn it." Just like if you were an actor, right? You would live the role until you learn the role. So I would live into that character until you learn that character, and that character becomes second nature. So that would be how I would shift the label. And again, that kind of comes back to shifting the paradigm.
Right. Man, that's so good. Thank you so much. Guys, if your mindset is not shifted from this episode, listen to it again and then listen to it 10 more times, because there's so much good stuff and ways to move forward from everything that he shared. And so, Marlon, appreciate it. How can people get a hold of you?
Yeah. Well, first off, Bryce, I want to say thank you so much for having me on the episode, having me on the podcast. The questions that you ask are amazing. I've been interviewed by people before, and sometimes like people just ask like either boring questions or they're just not very good at questions. It's like, all right, here's Marlon, and Marlon, go. And so, seriously, thank you for taking the time to prepare great questions. I absolutely loved this time here. For anyone that wants to get connected, the easiest way is to connect with me on Instagram or YouTube. Both of them are at Mindset Marlon. So that's Mindset, all one word, at Mindset Marlon, spelled Marlon for anyone that's listening. So it's an O N, not an I N. And yeah, just send me a request on Instagram, shoot me a DM. Let me know that you came from here, or just go to the YouTube channel and find me there. Either place is the best place to connect with me.
Awesome. Yeah, links will be in the chat. But yeah, Marlon, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Bryce, appreciate you, bro.